John Batman arrived in Port Phillip Bay on the 8th of June, 1835, and he sailed a small boat up the Yarra River. He landed on the northern bank of the river, almost exactly where the heliport now stands, and recorded in his diary, "This will be the place for a village." As Melbourne town developed into a thriving metropolis, the surrounding suburbs developed commercially to serve the needs of the city, and in populations to serve the labour needs of industry. The early settlers found the Richmond district an attractive place to live, with its closeness to Melbourne, the favoured hill areas, and the added attraction of the Yarra River bordering Richmond on three sides. These first settlers were gentry that included families such as the Dockers and the Hentys. Docker Street in Richmond is named after the former family, and by 1851, this society had its first church, named St. Stephen's. It was Richmond's topography that was to seal its fate. The river enabled secondary industry to spring up, industry that is still in existence today. Bootmaking, furniture, breweries, textiles, to name a few. As this industry took its foothold, the gentry kept to the hill areas, and the majority of Richmond was to become an industry-dominated working-class suburb. By 1865, the Gazetteer of Victoria had described Richmond as a suburban borough with a population of 11,000, with 40 hotels and an industry of 4 tanneries, several quarries, 1 starch factory, and 2 wool washing establishments. There is also mention of the Cremorne Gardens, which was situated at the end of Cremorne Street, near where the Nilex clock now stands. This early report of Richmond goes on to state that the Cremorne Gardens were built out to accommodate the population spread. The rapid expansion of industry and the increased growth in population eased between 1860 and the 1880s. The high immigration trends associated with the gold rush era passed. There was a steady growth of industry in Richmond. Outlying suburbs quickly developed, and transport corridors were carved through Richmond. Swan Street, Bridge Road and Victoria Streets, as well as the railway lines serving the eastern and northern suburbs. Richmond became not only a working-class industrial suburb, but also a suburb that most people passed through rather than settled. Richmond grew into a close-knit community with a distinct personality of its own. And within this community, an identifiable cohesive spirit developed. The nature of the community was somewhat determined by the large number of Irish Catholics that settled and worked in the area. And as the years rolled past, successive waves of immigration would see large numbers of particular nationalities settled in Richmond to gather strength and wealth before moving on.
It's a centre which the migrants, they come in from here and migrate again to outer suburbs.
The period 1880 to 1915 brought a housing boom, and in its aftermath, industry expanded rapidly, and the demand grew for cheap houses for workers located within close proximity of the factories. The speculative building of the 1880s saw the construction of small timber dwellings on any available land. This period shaped much of Richmond as we know it today. So in less than 70 years, Richmond developed into a suburb with a rich tapestry of people, industry, and a sense of place.
Richmond is a fascinating place. I'm also proud to be not only a resident in this electorate, but as a member of Parliament representing the area. I'm very proud to live through many changes.
Australian rules football epitomised the irrepressible spirit of the working class. Richmond was no exception, and in the halcyon days of the 20s and 30s, it was hard to imagine a person living in Richmond who did not barrack for their football team.
I've followed the old Tigers since I was 8 years old. When we used to get down there at 3/4 time for nothing, get in for nothing, and then up at the top of the Bridge Road was at the old National Theatre. We used to pick up voting tickets for Billy Marnie, was our hero, and we'd go round after the show to pick up voting tickets to give Billy Marnie, and the trophies were always furniture of some kind. I said, I think we furnished Billy Marnie's house.
The most important times of the Richmond Football Club connected with me or the family was around the 1930s when Richmond won 3 premierships with my brother Martin Bolger. That he was on the back line, Bolger, Sheen, O'Neill, and they were well known among the elderly people would remember them today, Bolger, Sheen, O'Neill, and they were the famous back line for Richmond.
Local politics has always been dominated by working class values, and more particularly by the Australian Labor Party. In the 1950s, the split of the ALP and emergence of the Democratic Labor Party caused bitter divisions in the local community. Australia-wide, this split effectively kept state and federal Conservative governments in office for several decades. In 1982, the Victorian government appointed Commissioner Alex Gillen to manage the affairs of the city of Richmond.
Well, I was appointed by the government to fill the vacancy in the Richmond when the government dispensed with the council. When I moved here first, I had to make arrangements to employ quite some of the leading officers.
Why was the council sacked? Well, a multiple reasons. They had their hands in the till, jobs for the boys, mismanagement. A lot of innocent people got hurt in that inquiry. A lot of innocent people. They were fringe people. It was unavoidable, part of it, but it was the only way they would have got at the full truth, I suppose.
The future of Richmond in 40 or 50 years' time will be decided in the next 5 years at the latest. If all the development which is in project in Richmond here is permitted to be developed, Richmond will probably be one of the richest cities in Victoria.
Australia is a nation that has grown through its progressive immigration policies, and history has given us wave upon wave of new settlers. Richmond has always been a place of transition, and these newcomers have contributed to the colourful nature of our city.
Well, Australia is a very fortunate place, both in terms of its history